pronunciation reminds me when I first came to Hawaii in 1980. I didn't know much about the Hawaiian culture, and I got off the airplane at Honolulu International and went to the first Hawaiian-looking person I saw and said, I've got this burning question. How do you pronounce the state? Is it Hawaii or Hawaii? And he said, well, it's Hawaii. And I said, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And he said, you're welcome. So here I am 39 years later, and I'm still not sure if it's Hawaii or Hawaii, but aloha, you definitely said it correctly. So we'll go to the next slide. If you're unfamiliar with Pacific Command, this is our AOR. It goes from the west coast of the United States all the way to the Indian Ocean, and from the North Pole to the South Pole. We call it Hollywood to Dollywood and penguins to polar bears. But if you look at the map, you can sort of sense what the energy challenges are by looking at the map. The tyranny of distance. I mean, I assume everybody from the mainland flew here, right? There's not much other way to get here. Well, you're only about a third of the way across the ocean to get to Asia from here. Then there's the choke points in the Straits of Malacca. There's the contested energy resources in the South China Sea. There is the remoteness of a place like Hawaii, trying to be forward deployed and support operations further west in the Pacific, but it's still a long way from here. And then there's China and India and their ravenous appetites for energy. And you have to understand that this AOR is completely different than what the Army has been fighting in the Marine Corps in CENTCOM for the last dozen years. For one, it's that tyranny of distance. You can fly across the AOR in a day here. You can drive across the AOR in a day in CENTCOM. The next difference is it's a land and, CENTCOM is a land domain and PACOM is a sea and air domain. The next one is the overland resupply in CENTCOM, right? That's what caused this whole energy problem in Operations Enduring Freedom and the other operations, Iraqi Freedom. But here we've got supply by sea, so that brings a whole new set of challenges. And then finally, the climate is much different between the Pacific and CENTCOM. The desert climate and the energy solutions that worked well in Iraq and Afghanistan may or may not work well in the Pacific. And that's sort of the theme of my presentation today. Here's some of the other uniqueness of this AOR. More than half the world's people, 52% of the Earth's surface. 6 largest armed forces are all in the Asia-Pacific region. 5 of the 7 mutual defense treaties, 16 time zones. And then we've got things like terrorism. It's not just ISIS. We're fighting terrorism all the time in places like Philippines. There's the emergency militaries in our region. There's the trafficking, both drug and human trafficking. And then real big thing here that you don't get as much in CENTCOM is the disaster response responsibilities we have here. And all those things have an energy element to them, right? This is a cool, oh, I'm supposed to point this at you, aren't I? This is a cool little overlay that shows you earthquake intensity in the yellow and red, and then tropical storm intensity in the blue. This is just, and as you know about the recent earthquakes, this is a region that is, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief is a way of life for the people here in the Pacific. All right, so this is an innovation panel. I'm going to talk primarily about TROPEC, but we've got in our office up at PACOM, I lead the Energy Innovation Office at U.S. Pacific Command. We've got a whole bunch of different initiatives. Starting, you can see along the horizontal axis, we go from installation to operations, and the vertical axis from local to regional. We first built an energy strategy in cooperation with the state of Hawaii to help them become a green state. Then we expanded it to the entire AOR in this installation energy strategy. We've recently published a Headquarters Pacific Command Energy Security Strategy. That was last year. We've updated the Blue Book. There's a Sand Book that sort of talks about how to do deployments in the desert. We have a blue book that talks about how to do deployments here in the Asia Pacific. Sea Pearls was a demonstration we did over on Maui with the Maui High Performance Computing Center to make it an energy efficient computing center. TROPEC will talk about. Spiders is a smart microgrid demonstration which is coming to conclusion at Camp Smith in August. And I'll put a plug out. We're going to have an industry day on the 27th of August at the Honolulu Convention Center. You can go on to a FEMP website, Federal Energy Management Program, or the APRISE website, which is a conference that's going to be held that week, Asia Pacific Resilience Innovation Summit and Expo, to sign up for the industry day, starting at the Honolulu Convention Center and then moving up to Camp Smith to actually see the microgrid site. J-Fish was a water initiative that sort of died on the vine, but still there's a need. Water, energy, and waste are sort of the three main logistics challenges out in our AOR. Speaking of which, joint deployable waste to energy, I don't even see that logo on here. Oh, there it is, the circle in the middle of the bottom. That is there's a lot of municipalities that use waste to energy to generate electrical power. Hawaii, Oahu, 99% of their garbage goes to a place called H-Power. It gets turned into electricity. But at the deployable size, there isn't that solution. And if you've been to Iraq and Afghanistan, you know they use burn pits or haul the trash off in the landfills. This is a more environmentally friendly way to do that, and you generate waste at the same time. So we've got a community of interest that is building a prototype for a deployable size waste energy system. JDeploy is looking at the entire military joint deployment planning process, that starts with an O plan potentially, or a warning order that goes all the way through the COA selection into a deployment order. There's not much energy consideration in all those decision points, so we're trying to figure out where to insert energy in that. So that's a good overview of some of the other innovative things we're trying to do at PACOM in the energy, water, waste realm. So now on to TROPEC. We talked about the tyranny of distance, cost, and times. One of the things we try to do in TROPEC is recognize that we've got short duration operations here. We've got 4-month, 3-month maybe humanitarian assistance, disaster relief operations. We've got 2-week exercises. We have some enduring operations that are in operational settings, but mostly our installations are the fighting platforms from which we will conduct our operations. So forward deployed in Japan and Korea and Guam. But what we want to do in energy solutions is make sure that it doesn't take more energy to get to the fight and reconstitute from the fight than it saves while it's in the fight. So that's a little nuance there that probably wasn't discussed as much in Iraq and Afghanistan because we were there for so long. And we talked about the vulnerability of supply lines. Northcom, and I've got my buddy here from Rod Gardner, they've got a phrase for the energy world in DOD. That's the home game and the away game. The home game is at the installations. It's all electricity, right? 99% of electricity comes from the utility around the installations. The away game is JP8, the battlefield fuel. In PACOM, it's blurred a little bit. Like I said, those installations, forward installations, are operational installations in our case, and we don't have a whole lot of FOBs like Iraq and Afghanistan. So what is TROPEC? Well, it stands for Transformative Reductions in Operational Energy Consumption. We are partnering. It was funded by the Office of Operational Energy Plans and Programs. Dan Georgi here was on that office when this got funded 3 or 4 years ago, and we're in sort of the about a year or two left of that original seed funding. And we partner with 3 main organizations. One is Oak Ridge National Laboratories, another one is Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and then finally our field experimentation team, which is sort of a conglomeration of SPAWAR folks, Space and Warfare Navy folks, and then NAVFAC, Naval Facilities Command. And what we do is we take new technologies and assess them in either a lab environment, one of the DOE labs, or in a field environment in the PACOM AOR in a realistic exercise or enduring operation. We have access to dozens of exercises through the various military services. So this is, the win question is sort of an ongoing effort. Whenever our sponsor wants to do something, we lay out, okay, here's some of the places where we can go. We've been to Jungle Warfare Training Center in Okinawa. We've been to Task Force Talon in Guam. We're getting ready to take a waste energy system over to Kilauea Military Camp, a rec center over on the Big Island. We've been to Philippines. We've been to Thailand. And there's just a lot of opportunities to do these kind of assessments. And the reason is to reduce the risk, to not repeat the mistakes that were made in Iraq and Afghanistan. One of the things we do that I think adds value is that we have a rigorous experimentation plan. So if there's a 2-week exercise, there's months and months leading up to that exercise where we develop this test plan that goes through all the measures of effectiveness, measures of performance, puts in a designed experiment format, which is a statistically significant way to work with a limited number of runs. And then we provide the sponsor with real feedback both on the performance of the system and the suitability of the system. And I'll talk to suitability in just a minute. So the value provided to TROPEC is these exercises that I mentioned. Feedback to the sponsor on how good their prospective system might work in a deployed environment. And then that bottom piece, right, the DOD and DOE expertise are essential to that. But that bottom piece I want to highlight is we're offering a 50-50 cost share. Because we've got seed money left over, we're going to pay for 50% of the cost of an assessment. If another government entity wants to pay for the other 50% of that assessment, let's talk. And then for the actual vendors who are bringing these technologies, they get feedback from the military. They get an assessment report that is an unbiased third-party assessment, and they get real Marines and soldiers to break their system and tell them what could and should be done better with it. And it's no cost to them. All they have to do is get it to California and we'll ship it to the test site. So here's sort of the array of things that can be done to reduce energy in a forward operating base. Things like HVACs, the ECUs, the environmental control units, and lighting, shower systems, microgridding, and I'll show you a chart that identifies some of the opportunities in each of those. Dining facilities, security lighting, and then the operations centers with all their electronics. We can bring in more energy efficient electronics, water cooled and so forth, which we've played with. So there's a lot of opportunities for energy efficiency at a typical forward operating base. Now here's a quiz for you. Of all those tents in there, which one do you suppose has the highest energy consumption? Any guesses? I just saw a report a couple weeks ago that looked at a fob in Iraq and metered every single tent. What's a guess? Dan? Billets? Good guess. Collectively, yes. But dining facility. Thank you, sir. The dining facility, because of all the hot water needs, because of the electrical needs, because of the air conditioning needs, is much higher than any of the other single tents. And that's one of the things we have not looked at yet. But we've got memorandums of agreement with Natick Soldier Center and NSRDIC, Natick Soldier Research and Development Center, and PMFSS, Force Sustainment Systems, that are developing and fielding those new energy efficient dining facilities. And when we hope to partner with them in that in the near future. So here's some of the results. What we do is we look at the various solutions, we evaluate the solutions, and then we try and transition that program. We have some moderate successes. For instance, the Raptor solar light cart was purchased at Task Force Talent after they saw how good it was. They bought 6 systems there. But in general, the sponsor, the program manager who's asking us to do this work, is the one responsible for transition. We can help them with the transition by giving them the data. There's a famous quote, and I forget who it was, but anyway, he said, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." We're the ones bringing data for this problem set. And then down on the bottom, you can see the opportunities that I presented in that previous page quantified from some of our observations so far. Insulation and shading can save up to 30%. Controls, ECUs, variable speed ECUs, 25%. Microgrids, 30 to 60%. So there's a lot of ways where we can reduce consumption on a fob. The quantitative measures that you see here notwithstanding, I talked before about the suitability issues. What we have observed in places like Task Force Talon, this is in Guam, is how many people have been stationed out in the Western Pacific besides me? Okay, I was stationed in Okinawa for 2 years. I was also in Mississippi and Alabama during my military career. And I can tell you there's nothing like the humidity levels that you get there. And as an example, in our home on base, in the summertime, it was so humid that you could not see out of the windows. There was constant condensation on the windows. I would walk out of my office, which was air conditioned, put on sunglasses, and boom, they would immediately fog over. My black shiny Corfram shoes, boom, immediately fog over. I had to jog before 7 o'clock in the morning. Otherwise, it would get just too dangerous from a heat standpoint to jog much later. Not only that, but typhoons. Our first summer in Okinawa, we had typhoons every other weekend, literally. 13 typhoons through that first typhoon season. And people don't really appreciate that unless they've been stationed out there. So what I'm going to describe to you is some of the things that happen in our evaluation of Task Force Talon in Guam because of those environmental conditions. Damaged shelter, snagged on generator. You can see the rip there on the air beam support shelter. What happened was a typhoon was coming, so they deflated the shelter, right? This is an air beam. It's like a bouncy castle. So they deflated it, waited for the typhoon to come back over. When they inflated it, it was snagged on an antenna from a vehicle and tore that thing right off. Tropical storm winds caused one of the dog bones to fail, causing the liner to sag. You can see that on the right. There's a couple of arrows. And then the vestibule adapter tore off. The seam during high wind, this is even before the typhoon hit. Mold, that's something you don't get much of in Iraq, right? Slide bracket of vertical support during a tropical storm, significant amounts of water infiltration. Some of that water infiltration is because of the various rips and such, but a lot of it is due to condensation. Here's some more failures. Collapsed overhead panel on the left. You can see it sort of sagging down and landing on the ground. Disconnected plenum, and then substantial amount of water infiltration. Light cart had significant water. Super Clue, anyone familiar with the containerized living unit? So this is an ISO container that has an OEPP program to make it even more energy efficient, and we tested that out in Guam. But you can see all those adhesives, because of the humidity, they didn't work very well. And you can also see along the adhesive there's some rust that's already developed. And it was only out there for 2 or 3 months. Broken solar shade support poles on the left 2 pictures. So these are the kind of things, and I've got 10 minutes left for questions. These are the kind of things that we've observed in the field. We originally had a system called the INET, Innovations Network. And the theory was that bring us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, your technologies from industry, from garages, from Department of Energy labs, and we'll adapt them to an operational environment. And it turned out that we went through, I can go back a few slides. We evaluated 111 of those technologies. We accepted 81 of them for evaluation. 25 of them went to lab assessments. 43 went to field assessments. But after we looked at those 43 in the field and we gave them to the program managers and said, here's a set of systems that we think might be useful in your areas. Do you have interest in any of these? In general, they were either familiar with them, had seen them themselves, or just not interested in them. So we sort of changed our focus away from this innovations network and the technology mining that we were doing there, and did more of a approach the program managers and say, okay, you guys tell us what you want us to assess. And so we've been doing that for about a year with pretty good results, and that'll continue through the 50-50 cost share until we run out of seed funding, and then we'll be down to a full fee-for-service model. So my bottom line is what works in Iraq and Afghanistan may or may not work in the Pacific. It's a harsh climate. I'm willing to take any questions. Yes, sir. Colonel George I.
Your 50-50 cost share. Could you just talk real briefly about that again? If there's somebody from the government willing to put up 50% and you find it an acceptable demo, TROPEC would be willing to pick up the other 50% and ship the process over?
Right. So the 50% would be for the cost of the assessment. And we define that as labor, planning, travel, and then the report writing. And any test equipment that's required to do the assessment, plus shipping from California to the point of assessment and back to California. Getting it to California would be the responsibility of either the vendor or the other government sponsor. And we work with the sponsor dynamically. We build a rough order of magnitude estimate right up front that says, here's what we think your assessment's going to cost for the venue that you chose. And then I'll say, let's not do it in Philippines. That's too far away, too expensive. Let's do it in Hawaii. Let's make it a 2-week test instead of a 1-month test. And we also develop the MOEs and MOPs dynamically with the sponsor as well, so that we have a good test plan before we go to the field. And I will tell you that that concept of the environmental conditions in Okinawa and the rest of the Pacific doesn't just apply to the testing of the systems, it applies to everything. For example, Squad Power Manager is a battery management system that a squad is supposed to take with them, where they can get power from a 220 volt, from a battery, from a solar cell, collect a bunch of batteries together. And we had a Marine unit lined up to do that with us at the Jungle Warfare Training Center, and along comes a typhoon. The Marine Corps unit had to redeploy back to their home station, so we're left with this assessment plan and no one to assess it. So what we did, took the cadre out there, because they were local to Okinawa. Once the storm passed over, took the cadre out and then tried to do as many of the scenarios as we could with the cadre, and it worked out pretty well. Does that answer the question?
No, it does, absolutely.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a question. So at one time, it was always downstream of the power generation.
Good question.
And I've noticed your chart, it now includes the generator.
Right, and we got approval from John Jennings and OEPP to expand it a little bit. I took a slide out that actually talks about that expanding. But recognizing the holy trinity of systems, energy, water, and waste, and the fact that, if you can decrease your water consumption, you're going to decrease your energy consumption. If you can turn your waste into energy, that helps. So, yeah. Microgrids, for instance, weren't originally in our scope because they were upstream of the generation. But you can see, like we talked beforehand, microgrids is a no-brainer. When you've got spot generators all over, supporting individual tents, if you can hook them into a microgrid and turn off half of them, which we've noted in several reports that's very feasible, then that's a huge win. Might as well just not even bring half the generators and plan to have a smaller set of generators microgridded together.
Now, how about non-material solutions like training and education?
Great question. One of the systems we looked at in Philippines was motion sensors, right? Because we all use them in our homes, but there hasn't been any military application yet for motion sensors. One of the other things was and that's still a material solution, but having just temperature readings in a shelter so that the soldiers and Marines could see what the temperature was and adjust accordingly, that's something else that we're doing. There's a program called Beyond, and I can't remember the name of it, but we're partnering with the Marine Corps' E2O, Energy Efficiency Office, Colonel Jim Cayley. That whole program is looking at non-material behavioral solutions. I saw a briefing once by Dazen Energy, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Energy, that says, you know, the military is really good at behavioral modification. It's called basic training. We should be able to apply that to field environments. And so that's what the Beyond program is doing, and we're partnering with them for a piece of that. Yes, sir.
Do TROPEC dollars have to be spent in the Pacific AOR?
No, matter of fact, we are in the process of working with AFRICOM. They've got a new bed down location there that I thought was going to be an Air Force executive agency, and they're looking at how we did a monitoring of Bala-Catan a couple of years ago, metering and monitoring of all the generators and the loads and the tents in Bala-Catan. So we're going to try and repeat that in Africa if we can get that approved. Good question. And we would prefer Pacific AOR, but John Jennings, OEPP, he's a joint guy. He wants to make sure that's applicable to all the COCOMs and all the services. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Jackie Space from BM&T.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi, from BM&T Partners. But my question was regarding the technology readiness levels. Are you looking at technologies that are ready for demo, or are you putting some of your funding towards actually helping mature some of the technologies?
Great question. So the TRL level we're looking at is sort of the 7-8 area. If there's a prototype, we can take it to the field. If it's not quite ready for the field yet, that's when we take it to the DOE lab and let them play with it in a equally defined manner with experimentation in the lab. And if you saw that slide I just showed a minute ago, we had more lab assessments, I believe, than field assessments. Or was that? No, I had that backward. 26 lab assessments, 43 field assessments. So generally, if it comes to us, it's going to be ready for the field. Hi, Jill.
So being a vendor with technology that innovators in particular tend to be small companies or let's just say not heavily funded, awash in money.
Yep.
So to get the companies that are innovators, the implication of what you've said so far is basically they have to fund their own provision of the technology for you, and then you pay for the testing, but they have to pay for if they're going to provide a generator or a building or the microgrid, it's their nickel to do that.
Yes, it's on a loaner system though, so it's not, I mean, if they have a prototype built, they're usually anxious to get it out and get it into people's hands to see how well it works.
Have you done any coordination with any of the other, I mean, there are several DoD related methodologies, and being a vendor, I've been asked to provide the same thing to several different things all on my nickel, and frankly it's unaffordable at a certain point. So the availability of the technology that you may be able to test, I mean, it would be interesting to see if the technology that has been deployed on the East Coast, in the middle of the U.S., would actually be useful also in the Pacific. But I can't give you another one.
That's why the collaboration with a government sponsor is critical. Most of those systems, if they're operational deployable systems, you're going to have either a rapid innovation fund or a small business loan, a SIBR, something that got you started to build that system, and there's government funding involved in that. Going back to the government sponsor in maybe a two-pronged approach between the vendor and TROPEC would be useful in encouraging them to test that system in a PACOM exercise.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.